The morning sun barely touched the frozen ground when Jake Miller rode out to check his cattle. 3 long years had passed since he'd been alone on this ranch in Montana. 3 years since his wife Linda had died from that terrible sickness that winter. The house felt too big, too quiet, and sometimes Jake wondered why he kept going at all. His horse's breath made white clouds in the cold air as they moved along the old fence line. Jake pulled his coat tighter around himself. Winter was coming early this year, and he could feel it in his bones. The cattle were huddled together near the water tank, their thick coats already growing for the harsh months ahead. Jake had been checking fences for 23 years, first with Linda by his side, then alone after she passed. He knew every rock, every tree, every bend in the old mining road that cut through his property. That's why the small bundle under the juniper trees caught his eye right away, something that didn't belong. At first, he thought it might be a hurt animal, maybe a deer that got tangled in some old wire. But as he rode closer, his heart nearly stopped. It was a child, a little girl, maybe 8 years old, curled up like she was trying to disappear into the earth itself. Jake jumped down from his horse so fast he almost fell. The girl wasn't moving. Her clothes were torn and dirty, like she'd been walking through the wilderness for days. Her dark hair was matted with twigs and leaves. She was so thin Jake could see her ribs through her torn shirt. "Hey there, little one," Jake whispered, kneeling down beside her. "Can you hear me?" The girl didn't respond. Her skin was pale and cold to the touch, but she was breathing. Jake wrapped his thick coat around her small body and lifted her gently. She weighed almost nothing, like a bird with broken wings. As he carried her toward his horse, something caught the morning light around her neck. Jake's breath caught in his throat. There, hanging on a thin gold chain, was a heart-shaped locket. Not just any locket. Linda's locket. The one with the tiny rose carved into the front. The one that had disappeared from their bedroom right after the funeral. Jake's hands shook as he looked closer. It was definitely Linda's locket. He'd given it to her on their wedding day 15 years ago. She'd worn it every single day until she died. But how could this strange little girl have it? Where had she come from? And why was she alone in the middle of nowhere? The questions swirled in Jake's mind as he carefully placed the girl on his horse. She was unconscious but still alive. That was what mattered most right now. The locket mystery would have to wait. The ride back to the ranch house felt like the longest 20 minutes of Jake's life. The girl's head rested against his chest and he could feel how weak she was. Her breathing was shallow and she hadn't opened her eyes once. Jake found himself talking to her even though she couldn't hear him. "Don't you worry, little one. We're almost home. I've got soup on the stove and warm blankets. You're going to be just fine." But even as he said the words, Jake wasn't sure he believed them. The girl looked like she hadn't eaten in days, maybe weeks. Her lips were dry and cracked. Her clothes were too thin for the cold weather, and they looked like they'd been expensive once upon a time. When they reached the house, Jake carried the girl straight to the guest bedroom. It was the room Linda had fixed up for the children they'd always planned to have but never did. The bed had clean white sheets and a thick quilt Linda's mother had made years ago. Jake laid the girl down gently and pulled the covers up to her chin. Then he went to the kitchen and heated up some chicken soup. Linda had always said soup could fix almost anything. He hoped she was right. While the soup warmed, Jake called Doc Peterson in town. The old doctor had been taking care of people in these parts for 40 years. If anyone knew what to do, it would be him. "Jake? That you?" Doc Peterson's voice crackled through the phone. "Yeah, Doc, I need you to come out to the ranch. I found a little girl, maybe 8 years old. She's unconscious and looks like she hasn't eaten in days. I'll be there in 30 minutes, Doc Peterson said without hesitation. "Keep her warm and don't try to give her too much food at once if she wakes up." After hanging up, Jake went back to check on the girl. She was still sleeping, but her color looked a little better. The locket lay against the white pillowcase, catching the light from the window. Jake reached out to touch it, then pulled his hand back. Something about this whole situation felt impossible, like a dream that made no sense. He sat in the chair beside the bed and studied the girl's face. She had dark skin and high cheekbones, and Jake guessed she might be Hispanic. Her hair was long and thick under all the dirt and tangles. She was a pretty little thing, and Jake found himself wondering who she belonged to. Someone had to be looking for her. The soup started to smell good, filling the house with a warmth Jake hadn't felt in years. He went back to the kitchen and turned off the heat, then returned to sit with the girl. Waiting was the hardest part. Where did you come from, little one? Jake whispered. And how in the world did you get Linda's locket? As if she'd heard him, the girl's eyelids fluttered. Jake leaned forward, his heart beating faster. After a moment, her eyes opened slowly. They were the darkest brown Jake had ever seen, like pools of coffee. The girl looked around the room, confused and scared. When she saw Jake, she tried to sit up, but she was too weak. It's okay, Jake said softly. You're safe now. I'm Jake. I found you by the old mining road. Do you remember how you got there? The girl stared at him for a long moment. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said something in Spanish. Jake didn't speak the language, but he understood the fear in her voice. English? Jake asked gently. Do you speak English? The girl nodded slowly. A little, she whispered. Her accent was thick, but Jake could understand her. What's your name, sweetheart? Elena, she said, her voice getting a little stronger. Elena, that's a beautiful name. How old are you, Elena? She held up 8 fingers, confirming Jake's guess. Are you hungry? I made some soup. Elena nodded, and Jake saw tears in her eyes. He helped her sit up against the pillows and went to get a small bowl of soup. When he came back, she was touching the locket around her neck. Elena, Jake said carefully, where did you get that necklace? The little girl looked up at him with those deep brown eyes. The lady, she said. The lady with the kind eyes. She gave it to me. Jake felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. What lady? Elena smiled for the first time since she'd woken up. She had dark hair like this. Elena touched her own hair. And she sang pretty songs. She said I should find the man who forgot how to smile. Jake's hands trembled as he held the soup bowl. Linda had dark hair. Linda loved to sing. And Jake definitely hadn't smiled much in the past 3 years. Elena, Jake said, his voice shaking. What did this lady look like? But before Elena could answer, they heard a car pulling up outside. Doc Peterson had arrived, and Jake knew the questions would have to wait. Right now, Elena needed help, and that was more important than any mystery locket. As Jake went to let the doctor in, he glanced back at Elena. She was still touching the locket and smiling that small secret smile. Whatever had brought her to his ranch, Jake had a feeling his quiet, lonely life was about to change forever. Doc Peterson was a short, round man with kind eyes and gentle hands. He'd delivered half the babies in the county and patched up the other half when they got into trouble. Jake watched nervously as the old doctor examined Elena. She's severely malnourished, Doc Peterson said quietly, so Elena couldn't hear, but she's strong. Kids are tougher than we think sometimes. Keep giving her small amounts of food every hour or so. Her stomach needs time to adjust. After the doctor left, Jake sat with Elena as she slowly sipped another bowl of soup. She was sitting up now, looking much more alert than when he'd first found her. Elena, Jake said gently, can you tell me how you got to my ranch? Were you with someone? Elena's eyes filled with tears. My abuela, she whispered. My grandmother. And my little brother Miguel. Jake's heart sank. Where are they now? I don't know, Elena said, starting to cry. Our car stopped working on the big road. It was so cold and Abuela got sick. She couldn't wake up anymore. Jake moved his chair closer to the bed. How long ago was this? Elena held up both hands, opening and closing her fingers. Many days. I walked and walked looking for help. Miguel was crying because he was hungry. Where is Miguel now? Jake asked, though he was afraid of the answer. I lost him, Elena sobbed. It got dark and I couldn't see. I called his name, but he didn't answer. I looked everywhere, but I couldn't find him. Jake felt his chest tighten. There was a 4-year-old boy lost somewhere in the wilderness. Elena, this is very important. Do you remember where you last saw Miguel? She nodded. By the big rocks that looked like a castle, there was a hole in the ground like a cave. Jake knew those rocks. They were about 5 miles from where he'd found Elena, near the old silver mine. If the boy had found shelter in one of those caves, he might still be alive. Elena, I'm going to call the sheriff. We need to find Miguel. But first, I need to ask you about the necklace. Elena's hand went to the locket automatically. The lady gave it to me. Can you tell me more about this lady? When did you see her? Elena was quiet for a moment, like she was trying to remember something important. It was the night Abuela went to sleep forever. I was so scared and cold. Miguel was crying. Then she came. She came to where you were? In my dream, Elena said. But it felt real. She sat with me and Miguel. She sang to us and told us not to be afraid. Jake swallowed hard. What did she sing? Elena closed her eyes and started to hum. Jake nearly fell out of his chair. It was Amazing Grace, Linda's favorite song, the one she'd hummed every morning while making coffee. She sang other songs too. Elena continued, about flowers and sunshine. She had the most beautiful voice. Linda had always said she wanted to sing professionally when she was young, but life on the ranch had taken her in a different direction. She still sang all the time, though. In the garden, while cooking, even while doing laundry. Elena, what else did this lady tell you? She said she had to give me something special. Something that would help me find someone who needed to remember how to be happy. Elena touched the locket again. She put this around my neck and said it would keep me safe until I found the right person. Jake felt goosebumps rise on his arms. Did she say anything else? She said the man would be sad because someone he loved went away. But she said love never really goes away. It just changes into something new. Elena looked directly at Jake. She said he would take care of me and Miguel like we were his own children. Jake had to stand up and walk to the window. This was impossible. People didn't visit children in dreams and give them real lockets. But the evidence was right there around Elena's neck. Elena, can you describe this lady again? She had long dark hair that she wore in a braid sometimes. And she had a little scar right here. Elena pointed above her left eyebrow. She smelled like flowers, like the garden behind your house. Jake turned around slowly. Linda had worn her hair in a braid when she worked in the garden. She had a small scar above her left eyebrow from falling off her bike when she was 12. And she always smelled like the lavender and roses she grew behind the house. Elena, have you ever been to this ranch before? She shook her head. No, but the lady told me all about it. She said there was a man here who used to laugh a lot but forgot how after she went away. She said he lived alone but his house was big enough for a whole family. Jake sat back down, his mind spinning. What else did she tell you about this place? Elena smiled. She said there's a secret garden behind the barn where she used to grow the most beautiful flowers. And there's a big tree with a swing that she always wanted to fix but never got the chance. Jake felt like he couldn't breathe. Linda had always talked about fixing the old rope swing by the oak tree. She died before she could get around to it. She said the man keeps her picture on the fireplace and talks to it sometimes when he thinks no one can hear. Elena continued. She said it makes her sad because she wants him to be happy again. Jake did talk to Linda's picture. Late at night when he couldn't sleep, he'd sit in his chair and tell her about his day, about how much he missed her. Elena, did this lady tell you her name? Linda, Elena said without hesitation. Her name was Linda and she loved you very much. Jake's knees nearly gave out. He grabbed the back of his chair for support. This little girl who had never been to his ranch, who had never met his wife, knew things that were impossible for her to know. She said you were the kindest man she ever knew. Elena continued. She said you used to bring her wildflowers every morning and that you made the best pancakes in the whole state. Jake did bring Linda wildflowers. Every morning for 15 years he'd pick something from the field on his way back from feeding the cattle. And his pancakes had been Linda's favorite breakfast. Elena, I need to call the sheriff about Miguel, but first I want to show you something. Jake went to the living room and came back with Linda's framed photograph from the mantel. When he showed it to Elena, her face lit up. That's her. That's the lady. Elena clapped her hands together. She's even more beautiful than in my dream. Jake stared at the photograph, then at Elena, then back at the photograph. In the picture, Linda was wearing the same locket that now hung around Elena's neck. She wanted me to tell you something, Elena said, her voice getting serious. She said to tell you that love is like a river. Even when you can't see where it's going, it keeps flowing. She said Miguel and I need someone to love us and you need someone to love. She said that's how love works best, when it goes both ways. Jake wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Elena, do you really believe this lady was real? Elena nodded firmly. She was real to me, and she knew you were real to her. She said you still wear your wedding ring even though she's not here anymore. She said that made her happy because it means you didn't forget her. Jake looked down at the gold band on his left hand. He'd never taken it off, not once in 3 years. But she also said it's okay to love other people too. She said love isn't like a pie where you run out of pieces. Love is like a candle that can light other candles without getting smaller. Jake had heard Linda say almost those exact words when her sister was worried about loving her stepchildren as much as her biological children. The phone rang, interrupting Jake's thoughts. He needed to call the sheriff about Miguel. but his mind was reeling from everything Elena had told him. Was it possible? Could Linda somehow have guided this lost little girl to his ranch? Whether it was real or not, one thing was certain. Elena was here, she needed help, and somewhere out there her little brother was lost and scared. Jake might not understand how any of this was happening, but he knew what he had to do. Elena, you rest now. I'm going to call the sheriff and get some people to help us find Miguel. Everything's going to be okay. Elena smiled and closed her eyes. I know it will be, the lady promised. As Jake walked toward the phone, he couldn't help but wonder if Linda really had kept her promise to always watch over the people he loved. And maybe, just maybe, she was still keeping promises he didn't even know she'd made. Sheriff Tom Bradley had known Jake for 20 years. They'd gone to high school together, and Tom had been one of the pallbearers at Linda's funeral. When Jake called about finding Elena and her missing brother, Tom didn't ask too many questions. He just said he'd be right over with a search team. Within 2 hours, Jake's quiet ranch was buzzing with activity. Sheriff's deputies, volunteer firefighters, and neighbors from surrounding ranches had all come to help look for 4-year-old Miguel. They spread out maps on Jake's kitchen table and planned their search routes. The girl says she last saw her brother near Castle Rock, Sheriff Bradley announced to the group. That's rough country, lots of caves and old mine shafts. We'll split into teams of 3 and search every possible hiding spot. Jake wanted to go with the search teams, but Elena wouldn't let him leave. She'd grab his hand every time he tried to walk away from her bedside. Please don't go, she whispered. What if Miguel comes looking for me and you're not here? So Jake stayed at the ranch, making sandwiches and coffee for the searchers while Elena rested. But rest was hard for the little girl. She kept sitting up in bed looking worried. They'll find him, Jake assured her. Tom Bradley is the best sheriff in 3 counties. If Miguel is out there, they'll bring him home. Elena nodded, but Jake could see the fear in her eyes. What if he's scared? He's only 4, and he doesn't understand what happened to Abuela. Tell me about Miguel, Jake said, sitting in the chair beside her bed. What does he like to do? Elena's face brightened a little. He loves trucks and dinosaurs. And he sings all the time, even when he doesn't know the words to songs. Abuela always said he was going to be a famous singer someday. What's his favorite song? The one about the wheels on the bus. He sings it over and over until everyone else gets tired of it. Elena smiled at the memory. And he loves cookies. Chocolate chip cookies are his favorite thing in the whole world. Jake made a mental note. If they found Miguel, he'd have to learn how to make chocolate chip cookies. Elena, can you remember anything else about where you last saw Miguel? Any detail might help the search teams. Elena closed her eyes, trying to remember. We were walking toward the big rocks because I thought maybe there would be a cave where we could stay warm. Miguel was holding my hand, but then he saw something. What did he see? A bird, I think. Or maybe a butterfly. He let go of my hand and ran after it. I called for him to come back, but then it got dark so fast. I looked and looked, but I couldn't find him anywhere. Jake squeezed Elena's hand. The searchers know that area really well. They'll check every cave, every hiding spot. Around noon, Sheriff Bradley came back to the house alone. Jake met him at the front door, hoping for good news. We found the grandmother's body about 3 miles from Castle Rock, Tom said quietly. Looks like she died from exposure. We also found their car broken down on the old logging road. But no sign of the boy yet. Jake's heart sank. How long do you think he can survive out there? If he found shelter and has some water, maybe a few more days. Kids are tougher than adults sometimes. And the weather's been mild for November. What about food? There are still some berries on the bushes up there, and if he's near a stream... Tom shrugged. We're not giving up, Jake. We've got teams out there until dark, and we'll start again first thing tomorrow. After the sheriff left, Jake went back to check on Elena. She was awake, staring at the ceiling. They didn't find him, did they? She asked. Jake sat down and took her small hand in his big, rough one. Not yet. But they're not stopping. Tomorrow they'll have even more people helping. Elena was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Jake, can I tell you something that might sound crazy? Sure, sweetheart. Last night when I was sleeping, I dreamed about Miguel again. He was in a dark place, but he wasn't alone. Jake felt his skin prickle. What do you mean? The lady was with him, Linda. She was singing to him and telling him stories to keep him from being scared. Jake didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to dismiss it as just a dream. But after everything Elena had told him about Linda, he wasn't sure what to believe anymore. In my dream, Miguel was safe. But he was waiting for something, Elena continued. Like he knew someone was coming to get him, so he didn't want to leave his hiding place. Elena, did you see where he was hiding in your dream? She nodded slowly. It was dark like a cave, but there was water dripping, and I could hear wind like it was coming through a tunnel. Jake knew those caves. The old silver mine had several tunnels, and some of them had underground streams. If Miguel had found his way into one of those tunnels, he could have water and shelter. But he'd be almost impossible to find without knowing exactly where to look. Elena, do you remember anything else from your dream? Linda said Miguel was being very brave, but he was getting weak. She said, Elena paused like she was trying to remember something important. She said time was running out, but that love would find a way. The next morning, Elena seemed stronger. She was sitting up in bed, eating toast and scrambled eggs. Jake had barely slept, worrying about Miguel and thinking about Elena's dream. Jake, Elena said as he brought her a glass of orange juice, I want to help look for Miguel today. Absolutely not. You're still too weak and it's dangerous out there. But I might be able to find him. I know Miguel better than anyone. Jake shook his head firmly. Elena, you can barely walk to the bathroom by yourself. You're not going anywhere. Elena's eyes filled with tears. But what if he needs me? What if he's scared and calling for me? Jake's heart broke looking at her. This little girl had already been through so much, and now she was torturing herself about her missing brother. Elena, the best way you can help Miguel is by getting strong and healthy. When we bring him home, he's going to need his big sister to take care of him. Around 10 o'clock, Sheriff Bradley called with an update. We found some fresh footprints near the mine entrance. Small ones. About the right size for a 4-year-old. We're focusing our search there today. Jake felt a surge of hope. Maybe Elena's dream meant something after all. But as the day wore on without news, Jake started to worry. How long could a 4-year-old survive alone in those caves? The nights were getting colder, and even with shelter, Miguel would need food and warmth. Elena seemed to sense Jake's worry. That afternoon, she asked him to sit with her. Jake, can I ask you something about Linda? Of course. In my dreams, she talks about you all the time. She says you used to sing to her when she was sick. Jake's throat tightened. During Linda's last weeks, when the pneumonia was winning, he'd sat by her bed and sung every song he could remember. His voice wasn't much good, but Linda had smiled every time. She said you have a beautiful voice even though you don't think so. Elena continued. She said music was one of the ways you showed love. Jake had to wipe his eyes. Linda always loved music. She said it was the closest thing to heaven we could have on earth. Maybe Miguel can hear music too, Elena said thoughtfully. Maybe if someone sang loud enough, he'd know it was safe to come out. Jake stared at Elena. What are you thinking? Miguel knows my voice. If I could go to where the searchers are and sing his favorite song, maybe he'd hear me and answer, Elena, you're still too weak to... Please. Jake, I know you don't want me to get hurt, but Miguel might die if we don't try everything. Jake looked at this brave little girl who'd already been through more than most adults could handle. She was asking him to trust her, to believe that love really could find a way. Elena, if I take you out there, you have to promise me you'll stay right beside me. No running off no matter what happens. Elena's face lit up. I promise. Oh, Jake, I promise. As Jake helped Elena get dressed in some of Linda's old clothes that he'd shortened for her, he couldn't help but wonder if he was making a mistake. But looking at the hope in Elena's eyes, he knew he had to try. Maybe, just maybe, love really could find a way to bring Miguel home. Diego spent 4 days in the hospital. Jack and Rosa visited him every day, and slowly the little boy began to trust his sister's new friend. Diego was shy and spoke mostly Spanish, but his eyes lit up whenever Jack brought him small presents, a toy truck, some crayons, or his favorite chocolate pudding cups. On the 3rd day, something happened that made everyone take notice. Diego had been having nightmares about being lost in the mountains. The nurses said he would wake up crying and couldn't be comforted. But that afternoon, while Jack and Rosa were visiting, Diego suddenly sat up in his hospital bed and pointed toward the window. La Señora Bonita, he said excitedly. The pretty lady. Jack and Rosa looked toward the window but saw nothing except the parking lot and some trees beyond it. What pretty lady, Diego? Rosa asked in Spanish. Diego's face was glowing with happiness. The one who sang to me every night? She's right there, can't you see her? She's waving at us. The nurse who was checking Diego's temperature looked puzzled. He's been talking about a pretty lady since he got here. Says she kept him company in the cave and sang him lullabies. Jack felt that familiar chill run down his spine. Diego, what did this lady look like? Diego thought for a moment, then climbed out of his hospital bed and walked over to Jack. He pointed to a spot just above Jack's left eyebrow. She had a little mark right here. Like you do? Jack touched his forehead, confused. I don't have a mark there, buddy. But Rosa was staring at Jack with wide eyes. Jack, you do have a mark. It's very faint, but there's a tiny scar right where Diego is pointing. Jack had completely forgotten about that scar. He'd gotten it as a child, falling off his bike when he was 7 years old. Catherine used to tease him about it, saying it made him look distinguished. But it had faded so much over the years that he never thought about it anymore. Diego, Jack said carefully, did the pretty lady have dark hair?
Si, and she smelled like flowers.
And she had a white dress that was bright even in the dark cave. Diego climbed back into bed and pulled the covers up to his chin. She told me you would come find me. She said you were a good man who takes care of animals and lost people. That night after they got back to the ranch, Rosa helped Jack prepare Diego's bedroom. They'd chosen the room right next to Rosa's with windows that looked out over Catherine's old garden. Jack, Rosa said as they put fresh sheets on the bed, do you think Catherine is still around somehow? Watching over us? Jack had been wondering the same thing for days. As a practical man, he'd never believed in ghosts or spirits. But the things these children knew, the details they described, it was impossible to explain away. I don't know, Rosa. But I do know that Catherine always wanted to help people, especially children. If there's any way she could still do that. Rosa nodded seriously. I think she brought us to you because she knew you were lonely, and she knew we needed someone to love us. The next day, Diego was released from the hospital. Jack had bought a car seat for his truck, and Diego seemed amazed by everything he saw on the drive to the ranch. He'd lived in cities most of his life and had never seen so many open spaces. But when they pulled into the driveway, Diego became very excited. This is the house, he shouted in Spanish, then switched to English. This is the house the pretty lady showed me. What do you mean? Jack asked, helping Diego out of the truck. In my dreams. She showed me a house with white pieces around the windows and a red door. She said this is where Rosa and I would live and be safe. Jack and Rosa exchanged a meaningful look. Diego had never seen Jack's house before, yet he described it perfectly. Over the next few days, Jack learned how much work it was to take care of 2 children. Rosa was independent and helpful, but Diego needed almost constant attention. He was afraid to be alone even for a few minutes. He followed Jack around the ranch like a small shadow, but Jack found that he didn't mind. For the first time in 3 years, he had a reason to get up in the morning besides just checking on the cattle. He had to make breakfast for hungry children, help them brush their teeth, and answer about 1,000,000 questions every day. Why do the cows moo? Where does milk come from? Can I pet the horses? Why is the sky blue? Diego's English was getting better every day, and he was fascinated by everything about ranch life. Rosa, meanwhile, seemed to have a natural instinct for taking care of animals. She wasn't afraid of the horses or cattle, and even the ranch dogs had adopted her as part of their pack. One evening, about a week after Diego came home from the hospital, something extraordinary happened. Jack was in the kitchen washing dishes when he heard Rosa calling him urgently from outside. Jack, come quick. You have to see this. He ran outside, worried that one of the children was hurt. Instead, he found Rosa and Diego standing by the fence that enclosed Catherine's old garden. They were both staring at something and talking excitedly in Spanish. What's wrong? Jack asked. Look. Rosa pointed into the garden. Jack looked and his breath caught in his throat. Catherine's garden had been dead for 3 years. After she died, Jack couldn't bear to maintain it, so he'd let it go wild. Weeds had taken over and the soil had become hard and barren. But tonight, in the exact center of the garden, a single flower was blooming. It was a white rose, Catherine's favorite. The bush had been completely dead, nothing but dry sticks, when Jack had checked it just last week. Yet here was one perfect white rose glowing in the evening light as if it had its own inner brightness. How is this possible? Jack whispered. Diego tugged on Jack's shirt. The pretty lady planted it. I saw her. What do you mean you saw her? Diego pointed toward the garden with great excitement. She was there this afternoon when you were fixing the fence. She was digging in the dirt and talking to the flower. She looked up at me and smiled, then she was gone. Rosa was examining the rose more closely. "Jack, look at the ground around it." Jack knelt down beside the fence. The soil around the rose bush was freshly turned as if someone had been working there recently. But that was impossible. Jack had been home all day and he would have seen anyone in the garden. "There's something else," Rosa said quietly. "Diego, tell Jack what the pretty lady said to you." Diego looked up at Jack with his big dark eyes. "She said to tell you that the flowers know it's time to grow again. She said you're ready to take care of growing things now because you have us to help you." Jack felt tears starting in his eyes. Catherine had always said that her garden grew best when there was love in the house. After she died, Jack had assumed the garden died because he didn't know how to care for it. But maybe it had died because there was no more love now. With Rosa and Diego filling the house with laughter and questions and hugs, maybe it was time for things to grow again. That night, after the children were asleep, Jack sat on his front porch looking out at the garden. The white rose seemed to glow in the moonlight, impossible and beautiful. He thought about Catherine, about the mysterious way these children had found him, about all the small miracles that had happened in the past 2 weeks. Whether it was divine intervention or just the most amazing coincidence in history, Jack knew one thing for certain. His life had meaning again. He had people to love and care for. He had a reason to plant flowers and make plans for the future. "Thank you," he whispered into the night air, not sure if he was talking to God or Catherine or the universe itself. In the distance, he could swear he heard the faint sound of someone humming Amazing Grace. The next morning, Jack woke up to find Rosa and Diego already outside, carefully watering the mysterious white rose and planning where they wanted to plant vegetables in the spring. Jack smiled as he watched them through the kitchen window. Catherine would have loved these children, and somehow he was beginning to believe she did. 3 months passed like a dream. Winter settled over the ranch with its usual quiet beauty, but this year Jack barely noticed the cold. The house was warm with the sound of children's voices, the smell of homemade cookies, and the daily chaos that comes with having a family. Rosa had started attending the local elementary school and was making friends quickly. Her English was getting better every day, though she still preferred to speak Spanish with Diego when they thought Jack couldn't understand them. What they didn't know was that Jack had been secretly studying Spanish online so he could surprise them. Diego was thriving too. The shy, frightened little boy who had been found in the cave was now a chatty 5-year-old who followed Jack everywhere and asked endless questions about ranch work. He'd gained weight and his cheeks were pink with health, but the most amazing change was in Jack himself. His neighbors barely recognized the man who had been a hermit for 3 years. Now he was seen in town regularly, buying school supplies and children's clothes, attending parent-teacher conferences, and even smiling at people on the street. Janet Mills, the social worker, visited regularly to check on everyone. During her December visit, she had important news. "Jack, I've been working with Carmen Ruiz, the children's aunt in Helena. She's very grateful for everything you've done, but she still can't take the children. Her husband lost his job last month, and they're struggling to support their own family." Jack felt his heart skip a beat. He'd grown so attached to Rosa and Diego that the thought of losing them was painful. "However," Janet continued with a smile, "Carmen has agreed that the children should stay with you permanently if that's what everyone wants. She thinks you're the best thing that's ever happened to them." Jack looked toward the kitchen where Rosa was helping Diego with his alphabet practice. They'd been doing this every evening after dinner, and Diego was already starting to recognize letters. "What would permanent mean exactly?" Jack asked. "Adoption if you're willing. Carmen would sign over her parental rights and you would become their legal father. It's a big responsibility, Jack. Are you sure you're ready for that?" Jack didn't hesitate. "Yes, these children belong here. This is their home." That evening, Jack sat Rosa and Diego down for a serious conversation. They gathered in the living room where a fire crackled in the fireplace that Jack now kept burning every night. "Kids, I need to ask you something important," Jack began. "How would you feel about staying here forever? About me being your new papa?" Rosa's face lit up like Christmas morning.
Forever and ever?
"Really? Really, but only if that's what you want." Diego climbed onto Jack's lap and hugged him tight. "I want to stay with you and Rosa and all the animals forever. Can I call you Papa Jack?" "You can call me whatever feels right to you, buddy." Rosa was more thoughtful. At 8 years old, she understood better what adoption meant. What about Abuela Elena? And our mama and papa who died when I was little? Jack pulled Rosa close with his free arm. We'll never forget them. They'll always be part of your family, and we'll talk about them whenever you want. But now you'll also have me, and I'll take care of you both no matter what. And we'll take care of you too, Rosa said seriously, because that's what families do. The adoption process took several more months, but finally on a warm day in May, they all went to the courthouse. Judge Martinez, who had been handling family cases for 20 years, smiled as he signed the final papers. Congratulations, Mr. Thompson. Rosa and Diego are now officially your children. Jack had tears in his eyes as he hugged his new son and daughter. Welcome to the family, kids. That evening, they celebrated with a special dinner and a cake that Rosa had helped Jack bake. As they sat around the kitchen table, Diego made an announcement. Papa Jack, I saw the pretty lady again yesterday. Jack and Rosa looked at each other. The children still occasionally mentioned seeing Catherine, though it happened less often now. What did she say this time? Jack asked gently. She said she was very happy because we're a real family now. And she said she doesn't need to visit anymore because we're all taking good care of each other. Rosa nodded seriously. I dreamed about her too. She was wearing the most beautiful white dress, and she was standing in her garden with all the flowers blooming. She told me to tell you thank you for making the garden pretty again. Jack looked out the kitchen window toward Catherine's garden, which was indeed beautiful again. All three of them had worked together to plant new flowers and vegetables. Rosa had a natural talent for gardening, and Diego loved digging in the dirt and planting seeds. Did she say anything else? Jack asked. Rosa thought for a moment. She said she was going somewhere peaceful now, somewhere she can rest, but she'll always be watching over us from far away. That night, after the children were asleep, Jack walked out to the garden one last time. The white rose that had mysteriously bloomed in winter was still there, but it was now surrounded by dozens of other flowers in every color imaginable. He sat on the old wooden bench that he and Catherine had bought for their 5th wedding anniversary. For a moment he could almost smell her flower perfume on the evening breeze. Thank you, Catherine, he whispered. Thank you for bringing them to me. I promise I'll love them and take care of them always. A gentle wind stirred the flowers, and Jack could swear he heard a faint whisper. I know you will. Be happy, my love. Jack smiled and headed back to the house where Rosa had left a drawing on the kitchen table. It showed a man, a woman, and 2 children standing in front of a house with white shutters and a red door. Above them, a beautiful lady with wings was smiling down from a cloud. At the bottom, in Rosa's careful handwriting, were the words Our Family, Papa Jack, Rosa, Diego, and Angel Catherine. Jack carefully pinned the drawing to the refrigerator, right next to Diego's latest attempt at writing his alphabet and Rosa's perfect spelling test. As he turned off the lights and headed upstairs, Jack realized something wonderful. For the first time since Catherine died, he was genuinely excited about the future. He had children to raise, dreams to help come true, and love to give and receive every single day. The lonely rancher who had lost everything had found something even more precious, a family that needed him as much as he needed them. And somewhere, he knew Catherine was smiling. 6 months later, Jack got a phone call that would have scared him to death just a year ago. Rosa's teacher was calling to say that Rosa had been chosen to give a speech at the school's talent show about her family. When the night came, Jack sat in the school auditorium with Diego on his lap, watching his daughter walk confidently onto the stage. My name is Rosa Santos Thompson, she began, and I want to tell you about miracles. She told the audience about getting lost in the mountains, about meeting a beautiful lady who gave her a magic locket, and about finding a sad man who needed a family just as much as she and her brother needed a father. Some people say miracles aren't real, Rosa concluded. But I know they are, because I'm living in one every day. My Papa Jack says that love is the biggest miracle of all, and when you share it with others, it grows like flowers in a garden. Jack wiped tears from his eyes as the audience gave Rosa a standing ovation. After the show, several people came up to congratulate him on having such a special daughter. You're very lucky, one woman said. Jack looked at Rosa and Diego, both chattering excitedly about the performance. Yes, he said, smiling. I'm the luckiest man in the world. As they drove home under a sky full of stars, Diego fell asleep in his car seat, and Rosa leaned against Jack's shoulder. Papa Jack, she said quietly. Yes, sweetheart. Do you think Catherine knows how happy we are? Jack looked up at the stars through the truck's windshield. Somewhere up there, he hoped his wife was indeed watching over the family she had helped create. I think she knows, Rosa. I think she knows.